walking for a while. My feet are getting tired. My heart's a little heavy, but you keep me going. Been walking for a while, mile after mile. My soul's a little weary, but you keep me going. You keep me going. You said it'd be a narrow road. You said it'd be a narrow road. So why am I surprised when it seems I'm on my own? You said it'd be a narrow road. Swear we'll never be my home. The journey might be lonely, but I'll never be alone. Oh, I'll never be alone.
Been walking for a while, wandering in the wild. You're holding me steady, yeah, you keep me going. Been walking for a while, following the fire. Your spirit is within me, and it keeps me going. You said it'd be a narrow road. You said it'd be a narrow road. So why am I surprised when it seems I'm on my own? You said it'd be a narrow road. This world will never be my home. The journey might be lonely, but I'll never be alone. Oh, I'll never be alone.
I'll never be alone. I will walk wherever you're leading, cloud by day and a fire by evening. You're the lamp that's guiding my feet, so I can see where I am going. I will walk wherever you're leading, cloud by day and a fire by evening. You're the lamp that's guiding my feet, so I can see where I am going. You said it'd be a narrow road. You said it'd be a narrow road. So why am I surprised when it seems I'm on my own? You said it'd be a narrow road. You said it'd be a narrow road.
This world will never be my home.
The journey might be lonely, but I'll never be alone. Oh, I'll never be alone.
Thanks for doing this, man.
You're welcome.
I was thinking as we prepared to sit down about our relationship and our friendship. And I'm not close to a whole lot of people. My circle's always been super small. But you are very much inside that inner circle. And as we prepared to sit down and have this conversation, I've just been thinking about our relationship. Over the last 2 or 3 years, it's been a super hard season for me, and you know that. And I was thinking about, we were pretty close before COVID.
Yeah,
But I feel like our relationship grew during COVID.
it did. Through Marco.
Through Marco
Yes,
Polo.
through Marco.
And I don't know if everybody knows what that is. It's a video messaging app, but it was in COVID when, I was having to make a lot of hard decisions and feeling super lonely like everybody was and isolated. And we would Marco almost every day, multiple times a day, and just communicating and stuff like that. And that in that hard season and over the last couple years, just how grateful I am for the relationship that God has allowed us to forge. But I didn't even realize until really fairly recently all the things that life has thrown at you. Because I only know, I guess we'll call it post-vintage Ryan.
Right. You didn't know pre.
No, because so I don't know I didn't know a lot of that story. And even as we're sitting down here right now, I feel like I've just skirted the edges of your story. And as I've gotten to know that story, I'm even more inspired by you. Because every time I'm around you, you're always encouraging me. Anytime I text you with like, dude, this is the hard stuff I'm dealing with, it's always something positive. You have always been such a source of positive, encouraging energy in my life. And now, somewhat knowing what life has thrown at you, it's even more impressive that's who you are, because you've been through some hard stuff, man. And the hardest thing maybe that you've been through has to deal with your mom. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So my mom was my rock, right? I know you talk about Joe and how great of a mom she was, and she's the greatest mom ever, but I think my mom was, gunning for that position as well. And
I think everybody thinks that about their mom,
yeah.
right?
And you got to say it too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But my mom was my champion, and just very strong in her faith. Wanted to make sure that when I was growing up, me and my brother knew God, and was just the champion of the community, right? When people didn't have things, she would do anything she possibly could to make sure that whatever their need was, like, it got met, right? And that was just the type of person that she was. And unfortunately, when I was 8 years old and my brother was 3 years old, she got diagnosed with cancer. And so it started with as breast cancer, and she went to get cancer treatment at Duke. And so we basically grew up on the Duke campus while she was at the medical center. We'd go to Duke games, just kind of get away. So there's, I'm not a bandwagon fan. That's how I got to Duke and being a huge fan. But, I just watched her go through this entire process. And anyone that's been through cancer just knows like the toll that it takes on your body, physically, mentally. Like it's a battle for your life, right? And, during that time, I just watched her faith grow the entire time. I was talking to my aunt the other day just in preparation for all this and having this conversation. And she said, when she was going through all these trials and tribulations of cancer treatment and couldn't get out of beds and, in the mornings, that she would just talk to her about God and wanted to make sure like the time that she had, she didn't know how much time she'd have, but she was going to really invest in Kathy. And she was worried about where my grandfather was spiritually, right? So I've seen all these notes that she has written him, just trying to just say, hey, like, God's real, God's here, like just trying to help them build their faith. So yeah, as we grew up, she beat cancer the first go round, and we thought we had gotten through it, and we realized that we hadn't, because a few years later, it came back. And when it came back, it went from breast cancer and just kind of spread all over her body. It went to all her bones, it went to her brain, and it went, to her spine. It was just kind of came back, and it was everywhere.
So you were 8 years old when she
first got diagnosed.
breast cancer, and she went into remission.
Mm-hmm.
And then how old were you when it came back?
She probably was in remission for about a year or so. So I would say the first go round was about 2 years. Then we got about another 2-year break. And then it came back when, I was probably 12 to 13 years old.
How did that hit you? Because, dude, that's a tough time just to be a person.
Yeah.
12, 13 years old.
Right.
And then you've watched your mom stay so faithful. And, when people go through hard things, one of two things often happen. It either presses you into God or it pulls you away from God. And it sounds like it pressed her into God. But what about for you? Like when it came back, what was the first thing as far as just your emotion and like your thoughts towards God in that moment?
Yeah, I was devastated. How do you hear that? And she knew. She was with my brother in the car and actually had sneezed, right? And when she sneezed, she was like, "It's back," without seeing a doctor, without anything like that. And it was just my brother and her in the car. And then she went back to the doctor, and sure enough, it was back. And I was kind of lost, right? I was just wondering, like, why do we have to do this again, right? Go through this again. But, she was determined to fight, right? And she was determined that this wasn't going to define her, wasn't going to define her faith. Like, she just grew stronger, probably even more so stronger with the second go round, and she went through, and when it spread, it got into her bones, and she was doing bone marrow transplants. And at that time, they couldn't even give you any anesthesia. They would just basically drill right through your back into your bone and take the bone marrow out and test it. And, so she would go into these situations knowing that the pain was going to be unimaginable, right? And it was just hard. And then so she had it had gotten into her neck, and she knew that she had to get neck surgery. And then coming with that, though, after she had the neck surgery, she had to have a halo on. And the halo, basically was drilled into her head, had a big halo around it and these big metal rods, and had a big chest protector. And, she couldn't move at all. And, she was in that for probably 8 months or so. And I remember the hardest thing of that is knowing the battles that she was going through. And when we would be out in public, I got really defensive of her, because people would be out there and point, and you would see younger kids laughing. And, I understand that it was different to see that, right? But I got really angry, because I just thought, like, you don't know what she's going through right now. Like, the battle what it took to even get her out of bed and just to get her in here, just to get out of the house and go shop for a little bit. And it was just, it was hard.
So what was the next few months like, and when did it turn?
Yeah, so she had a really big battle for about 2 years or so. And then we knew that the end was probably inevitable.
The cancer was going to take her life.
The cancer was going to take her life, right? And that's when she took the opportunity to really start pouring into people. Even towards the end, she was going around to different churches.
When did she realize, did she know that it was coming?
When it came back quick, and it
Yeah.
came back with a vengeance, and it moved very, very fast. And it just completely disabled her physically to where she couldn't even.
When did
really
it
go
hit
there.
you that mom might not make it through this?
Probably when the halo, when she had to get neck surgery. And that was when you looked at her and you saw her in that, you knew how serious it was, right?
And you're 13.
Yeah, probably 13 or 14 years old at that point. So
What did that do to you, man?
it just hurt, right? I mean, I don't have words to describe that. I remember praying all the time, like, God, like, she's been through enough. Like, give me the cancer. Like, let me take that for her for a little bit. I can carry it. She's done enough. And I just wanted to help her, right? And my brother was in the same boat. I mean, we'd just sit there and just be like, you're just helpless, right? There's nothing that you can do at all in that situation. And it's terrifying and scary, because I remember when we were getting to the end, I didn't know how I was going to move forward in life, and then it kind of towards the end, for like the last 2 weeks, like last week and a half, she was basically comatose. She'd be in and out of a coma. And then we called in hospice. And I think that's really when it hit our family, my brother, that like, we're about to move forward in life without my mom. Wow. And she ended up passing like in our house. And I remember running out, and that's like when my life changed, right? And I remember running out of my house, and the first thing, and there was a lot of people at our house, and I ran out of the house, and the first thing I grabbed was a bat that was outside, and I started hitting a tree, and I was just hitting the tree just like over and over and over, because I was so mad that she was gone at this point, to the point where my hands were numb, and I couldn't lift my arms, and I ran up to the top of the road and just sat there and was just bawling. And my aunt and uncle pulled up right at that moment, and I had to tell her brother that, my mom just died. So.
Where are you in your faith and trust in God and belief in that moment? How is all that impacting the spiritual side of
I
your
didn't
life?
understand it.
Yeah.
Right? I was mad at God. And when I ran out of that house that day, I was really angry at God for taking my mom and sitting there and just like, how do I move forward, God? Like, she was my champion. She was my rock. Like, how, as a family, how are we just not, how do we move forward? You know, and I was mad, Matt. And that just, from then, my anger took over. And it was just something that, you know, I remember just as I progressed through the next couple weeks, right? Probably one of the hardest times that I had was I played soccer all the time. Like, soccer was kind of my life. And we were sitting there playing in Brevard High School. And she always sat in this one little certain area. And I was out on the field and I was talking to my coach, and I knew I needed to just kind of find a relief from all this and just go out and play. And I looked up in the stadium and she wasn't there. You know, and I had so much support from the whole community. But like, looking up and her not being there, like, I played to make her proud, and she wasn't there anymore. You know, and that's when I'd go through Mother's Day and Christmases and birthdays, and it just, every time I could never think of the good things and the good times that we had in life. Like, I was just mad that she was gone. And it ate me to a core.
How did that anger impact like relationships and life? And
You know, I don't know if you've ever been around someone that's angry, but it's not fun to be around those people. You know, I mean, there's that negativity that is always there that you don't want to be around, you know? And as a guy, I remember my dad took me to go see a psychologist to kind of just check in to see how everything was going. And I walked in there and I sat down with this lady, and she looked at me and she said, well, like, how are you feeling? And that was her first question that came out. And I said, how do you think I'm feeling? And I got up and walked out. And I was just like, the audacity to ask me that, just to start off the conversation of like, how are you feeling? Like, I'm wrecked. I am absolutely wrecked. My life is in shambles. Like, how do you think I feel? And yeah, so it was tough.
so you have to finish high school without your mom. And if that loss wasn't hard enough, trying to process all that, now you and your brother and your dad trying to navigate life, you got hit with some more losses over the next several years.
So right after my mom died, we were in Brevard for probably about another year or so. And then we decided we need to make a change. So we moved to High Point. I was a junior in high school, and my brother was in middle school. So we made the move and thought it would be good, just like change the scenery might help, right? Which is what it is. But I got there and I met my best friend. So another guy, Garrett Smith, had just moved from Texas to High Point, and we had met within about a week and a half. And he was like one of those guys that you instantly meet and you just knew you were going to be best friends. So from that day on, I stayed at his house, or he was at my house probably 5 out of 7 nights a week. And we were just absolutely best friends. And everything, we played soccer together. Anything we did was together. His mom and dad, Dugan and Debbie, are just two of the most phenomenal people in the world. And they were basically my second parents. So Dugan did a lot of raising me during those times. But just that family that knew what we were going through and was there to help us. And so I had left after about a year and a half. I left and went to ECU, went to college, and he was a year behind me, so he stayed. And I got a call one morning that he had been at a party and tried to break up a fight, and the guys that he broke up the fight with came back and hit him in the back of the head with a bat, and knocked him unconscious. And EMS came and picked him up. And during that time, I think the two gentlemen knew how serious the situation was, and they skipped town. They just ran. And then I got the call at ECU, and then went up there to see Garrett laying in the ICU bed, you know, and that being like just your best friend, right? And seeing him just lay there, and seeing Dugan and their family talking and trying to make decisions on like what's the best quality of life for Garrett going to be. And ultimately the doctors and everything, they decided they couldn't save him. And if they were able to save him, there was not going to be a quality of life there that was probably worth saving. So they they took him off, they took him out of the ICU and just, allowed him to pass peacefully. But, and at that time seeing, I was already in such a dark place with my mom, and to have that on the tail end of that 4 years later just brought me down even deeper. And the week after, the two individuals still weren't in custody, and you had all these legal proceedings that were starting, and it was just this unreal circumstances that you couldn't even describe, the feeling of just being completely desperate of how am I going to process it? How am I going to move forward? Right. And I think at that point I was so lost. I was just begging God to take my life so I couldn't live with the pain and the suffering and the hurt anymore. And I thought life would be easier if I was just gone. And I would just, I couldn't even tell you how many times I prayed that, but I was so hurt. I didn't want to move forward in life. And I just wanted him to take me just so I could be in heaven with him and my mom and Garrett, and because this world was just cruel. And as I worked through that, at ECU, I met another, one of my best friends, Andrew Cross. And while we were there, he was deployed. This was kind of when Iraq and everything was going on, the war in Iraq. And he got deployed. And when he was there, he was in one of the biggest firefights in Fallujah that there was at the time that he was there. And while he was there, he drove a Bradley, right? And so when he was there, one of his good friends next to him was driving a Bradley, and an RPG had gone through the viewfinder of the Bradley and smoldered in his chest. And so he was on the radio, and Andrew had heard one of his best friends just screaming out over the radio, right? And he didn't make it. And so when he came back, he had such a severe case of PTSD, right? And we would sit there and I would talk to him all the time, but the VA's answer to that was that they would just give him medication to help cope with the PTSD. And I knew he had a problem during that time, and I would just beg him, like, let's just find another avenue to, and I would try to talk to him, but I was in no place to try to help him because I still was working through my mom and Garrett. And ultimately he ended up overdosing on the floor.
He died.
And he died. And there was 3 in a row. Matt, I mean,
How old are you at this point?
I was probably 21 at the time. And it was just another best friend, after your mom, now your second best friend that you're having to bury. I was so mad at God. I honestly thought that I was, God was going to punish me for the rest of my life. And if I could just hold on to still believe in him, that if I could just get through life, hopefully I'd make it to heaven one day. But I didn't see anything good. I couldn't. I was in such a dark place of anger, of just anger.
I know it's all you've got to just be strong. And it's a fight just to keep it together. I know you think that you are too far gone, but hope is never lost. Hope is never lost. Hold on, don't let go. Hey, hold on, don't let go. Just take one step closer. Put one foot in front of the other. You'll get through this. Just follow the light in the darkness. You're gonna be okay. I know your heart is heavy from But just remember that you are a fighter, a fighter. You never know just what tomorrow holds. And you're closer than you know, so much closer than you know. So hold on, don't let go. Hey, hold on, don't let go. Just take one step closer. Put one foot in front of the other. You'll get through this. Just follow the light in the darkness. One step closer. Put one foot in front of the other. You'll get through this. Just follow the light in the darkness. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. When the night is closing in, don't give up, don't give in. This won't last, it's not the end, it's not the end. You're gonna be okay. When the night is closing in, don't give up, don't give in. This won't last, it's not the end, it's not the end. You're gonna be okay. When the night is closing in, don't give up, don't give in. This won't last, it's not the end, it's not the end. You're gonna be okay. When the night is closing in, don't give up, don't give in. This won't last, it's not the end, it's not the end. You're gonna be okay.
I hear your story, and again, I've said to you that the more I get to know your story, the more I'm inspired by you. Because I don't know that I'm strong enough to withstand everything that you've talked about and come out on the other side with my sanity, much less my faith. And I think most people who know you, until you tell them these stories, they never see these things. Because people who've been through what you've been through don't live the way that you live. And I don't mean that to puff up or anything like that, but just I'm talking about with the joy, with the laughter. And anybody who knows you, and sees you, your beautiful wife, Ashley, and your beautiful daughter, Mikey, and you see where you are now. So by the time you're 21 years old, you've watched your mom battle cancer over several years, only to die in your home. You move to a new place for hoping for a new start, end up in college, and your best friend gets beaten to death. Then another friend in service to our country comes back and is so broken from that, overdoses and dies. Like, that's a string of loss that would bury most people.
Because it seemed like a pattern had developed. I saw a pattern developing in my life that every 3 to 5 years, I lived with the expectation that I was going to have some kind of significant loss. And I lived with an anxiety of knowing or thinking it was right around the corner.
Wow.
Right. So after Andrew, my aunt was a world-renowned skeet shooter. She was like #2 in the world, sponsored by Beretta. She had her own ranch where she taught people how to shoot. Right. And she, I'm not sure of all the circumstances, right? But she was shot in the head.
Your aunt?
My aunt was, yes. And so she's still alive today, and she's still battling.
So she made it.
She made it. Yeah, she's made it and she's battling. But that's another one that was within that 3 to 5 year window. That I seen that pattern just develop, and so I had to go through that one as well. Even with unsure circumstances, just there was another one, right? There's just another one.
It would seem like you would just be incapable of joy, just waiting for another horrific thing to happen.
I was great at faking it. Like I faked it,
Really?
right? I would smile and have fun with you, and I would sit there and you would think everything was okay, but I just buried everything. And even my wife knows that I wouldn't. Emotionally, I was unavailable.
When did
right?
you and Ashley meet?
So we met back when she was in college at High Point, and I was getting my master's at High Point University.
So when in this whole sequence of events do you and Ashley meet?
So this was after Andrew, before my aunt.
Okay.
So
So when you met Ashley,
This is
you're
about
still in a
2008.
pretty dark place.
yes, I definitely was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it took me even a while to open up to her about everything. And what I hate to think about looking back is just all the time she probably needed me. And I was so cold and just so hardened inside, like not being able to be the husband that she needs because I was so cut inside and I was so hurt.
Yeah. How did it impact your marriage in the beginning? With all
It
that.
had, so I mean, when I got mad, right? And she probably lived on eggshells with me, not knowing and hoping I wouldn't get mad because when I went, it went.
Yeah.
And it would just be, you'd black out. You'd be so angry over nothing, right? You'd be going through the drive-through at Chick-fil-A and someone would do something, and I could just get set off with anything. And it's because the pain that I was holding in, it just felt good to release it. And that's the only way I knew how to release it, is just through these outbursts of anger, as backwards as that sounds.
So when did it shift and how did it shift? Because I think there's a lot of people that are experiencing, the word that keeps coming up that I keep hearing over the last year, 2 years, is the word heavy. That it seems like everybody's just carrying this heaviness because, man, very few people, I think, deal with the amount of loss that you've dealt with in such a short period. Not just that you dealt with loss, you had to deal with loss in a period when you were still growing, developing, maturing as a person. It's one thing for somebody, it's never easy to lose your mom, no matter what. But it's one thing for somebody in their 50s whose mom is in their 80s and lived life and that kind of stuff. And that's one way to be able to process it like that. But in the teenage years, in those college years, when there's so much of trying to find yourself and figure out your identity, that I think when that amount of trauma and hardship happens in those formative years, very few people recover from that. And I feel like there's a lot of people that sit in our church and they're climbing uphill because they were wounded so bad as a kid and now they're an adult. And I don't think a lot of people overcome these things, unfortunately. Not that because they can't and God's not big enough, but so many people don't. And how are you sitting in front of me, the man that I know that you are?
Vintage. I mean, that's it. Like, we had been to a bunch of different churches and I was trying to find a way to let all this go. I just couldn't, because every time any kind of holiday came around, like the miss that you feel of these people and just wanting to talk to them, it pulls you back. And we were looking at, different churches, and I never found a church that I connected with, a pastor I connected with, like any people within the church that we really connected with. And we would go and just kind of check off the box. And then I had this lady that used to babysit Mikey said, "Hey, have you ever heard of Randleman?" And I was like, "Randleman? No." She was like, "Well, there is a awesome church down there, Vintage. Like, you need to go check it out." And I was like, "Randleman? Like, really? Like, okay." And then we walked in and we sat down. And as soon as we sat down, Jasmine got up on stage and started talking. And I look over at Ashley and I'm like, "I'm pretty sure that's Jasmine Bird." Jasmine didn't right now, but I was like, I'm almost sure that's Jasmine. So instantly, like I had a connection here. And
So
I couldn't,
people need to hear that story.
Yeah.
So you, as you mentioned, you were in Brevard. You spent a good portion of your life in Brevard. Jasmine is too from Brevard.
right?
So
We grew up together.
you grew up
Yeah,
together.
like literally grew up together.
Yeah.
Same classes. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many classes we were in the same, in the same classes as. And then her husband, Lyle.
Yeah.
Lyle's, I think his mom was a first grade or second grade teacher.
She's his teacher, yeah.
Yep. She taught my brother. So like we had this connection.
So you walk into this random church in Randleman.
in Randall. Yeah.
And Brevard's not a big town. It's
No.
not a big area. It's not like thousands and thousands of people. It's a pretty small town. And all of a sudden, you walk into this random church in Randleman, and the first thing is somebody from your childhood.
Yep, there's Jasmine.
Wow.
I was like, no way, no way. So I couldn't wait to run out into the lobby and go catch up with her. And then you got up there, and you started preaching, and I was up there, and I was like, there's just something different about this place. Like you were up there, and I had never seen such a transparent pastor before, and talking about the own things that you battle with. And I looked at Ash, and I was just like, this is where we belong. Like we knew instantly, like we belong here. And I felt as we walked in here, I was like, we need to get involved here. And this isn't a plug to try to get people to volunteer here, which you should, right? But I felt like a pull of you need to be here. And as we were here, we started volunteering and started meeting just everyone at Vintage. And I'm biased, but I think we have the best people in the world here, right? And I started building relationships with like Christian and you and Terry. And I hate naming names right now because there's so many, but God used this place to start softening me up and really start softening my heart. And as we came more and more and more, I started just kind of letting go and just, he uses you to just speak truth into my life. And I related to you so much by you being willing to stand up there and raise your hand and saying, I struggle with that. And I'm like, well, so do I. And I'm sitting here and he was just used you to let my guard down. And I think the turning part of my life was when you did the Toxic series and it was Stop the Madness, which was all about anger. And I remember I was 3 rows up on the left side and you just started in on this and you said some really uncomfortable things about the battles that you had with anger. And I related so much. And I think before that, I had asked God to help me through, but I don't ever think I fully surrendered to him. I don't think I asked it, but my ego was still in the way. But that day was the most impactful sermon that I've ever heard in my life. And I've listened to it probably 100 times since then. But I was 3 rows up and I was bawling. And that was the first time in my life that I just released it to God. And I said, God, like, I can't do this anymore. It's like, I don't want to be mad at you. I need your help because I can't carry this anymore. Because I'm going to die of a heart attack in the next couple of years because I can't carry the stress. And I just remember sitting there crying. And that was the first time I had completely and fully surrendered to God and just cast all my burdens on him. And walking out of here, you always talk about carrying the chains. And I remember you just dropping the chains on the stage. And that's what it felt like. Like I had dropped everything that I was carrying and I walked out a changed person.
There were probably moments that you thought this darkness is never going to go away. And I think that's what, as you tell your story, I think about people that are in the heart of the darkness. People that are in that season of loss or pain and struggle that feel like it will never end. As we're on the brink of a new year. And even in this season, we come through the holidays. As you just mentioned, the holiday season, everybody talks about, it's about joy and all this kind of stuff. But for so many people, it's the hardest because it is somebody just celebrated Christmas for the first time without mom. Somebody just went to a holiday party without that friend or on the other side of the divorce or whatever. And now you stand on a new year and some people who walk into a new year with such hope of a new year, but we both know that new year, new you is not a real thing. It's new year, same you, new year, same problems. And it feels like for some people, the calendar is changing, but that's the only thing that's changing. And I don't know, what would you say? But to those people, that are in that space or in that. I feel like you've had to climb out of a deeper pit than most people, only to be thrown into a new pit, climb out of that pit, thrown into a new pit, then climb out of another pit. And you and I both know there are people that are in pits that they think, I'm going to die in this pit, and I want to die in this pit. How do we give them hope?
I look at this. So this was my mom's Bible, right? This is like my most prized possession. And I just go through here and I look at like, where did she find encouragement in the word, right? And right on the inside of the cover, this was dated 10/10/1995. So this is when the cancer came back a second time and it was much, much worse. And the thing that sticks out to me on the front cover, it says, look at God, not your circumstances. And to know like when that was written and what she was going through during that time, it's just like, wow. You know, and as I've gotten through this and I've looked back and everything, like I want to have the faith that she did during those trials and those tribulations, to look at that and look at God and not the circumstances that you can't get out of bed, that you have a halo on, that you can't even make it to the toilet without getting sick, with just knowing that the end is inevitable and you taking that time to pour into other people. And she never wanted for it to pity her. And I find so much hope in that. Right. And I still battle with those thoughts around Christmas. And as we go into New Year's and birthdays, like it's still hard. And I still cry all the time about my mom and my friends. Right. But I've lived such a perspective of being the victim my whole life. Like I never want to do that again. And yes, that took a lot of time to have that perspective. But one of the favorite things that I do is I am determined to find gratitude in every single situation, no matter what I'm going through now. And I have a tendency to do long bike rides, right? Like, which you know.
Because you're crazy.
Because I'm crazy sometimes, or I get talked into them. But my favorite exercise to do is just, I find myself, when I pray, it's easy to pray about 5 or 7 things that you're always grateful, right? I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for this food. I'm grateful for this house. You know, whatever it is. And I think that can get repetitious, right? And it's really easy to do. And is there really true meaning or thought behind that after you pray the same prayer all the time? But I like to just get out there and turn my music on and just, God, like, show me what to be thankful for, right? And I'll spend 30 minutes to an hour just going through my head of like, God, like, what do I need to be thankful for today? Like, I see it. Thank you. Like, yeah, I see that. And your list will be so long by the end of it. And your perspective will be completely shift of no matter how bad things are, right? There's so many things to be grateful for. Yeah. And it's a mindset of, now that I have, is like, I'm going to find the good things, right? When I look back at my mom and Garrett, like, and everybody, like, I'm so grateful that even though the time was short, I'm so grateful for the time that I did have, because I learned so much from her. And how awful would my life have been, or worse would my life have been if I didn't have her in it? So even though that's shorter, I'm so grateful that
it's better than nothing.
It's better than nothing, right? And I'm grateful that, you know, Dugan and Debbie Smith, you know, how do you navigate those waters of losing a child to violence, right? But now they're starting Garrett's Place. It's been started, but their new mission is going to be, we're going to help other parents that go through traumatic events and you know, violent circumstances, and they lose children. Like, we're going to be their champion, and we're going to help them get through those waters, right? So it's there, right? And we all need each other for encouragement. And that's why, you know, with our relationship, when I know all the battles that you have, like leading this church, and I want to be that encourager for you, because I know you're in the middle of tough decisions, but no matter what, like, God's leading all of this, and he's here and he's working, and there's goodness in every single situation.
That's good. As you're talking, it's not cliche when it comes from people in real stuff. For a preacher whose life is put together and, for all intents and purposes, pretty doggone easy to say, oh, just look at God, not your circumstances. But for you to read the words of a woman who's in the midst of fighting for her life, probably heartbroken because she knows that she's not going to watch her son graduate or get married or ever get to hold Mikey when she was born, she still had hope that she found the good, that there's never a time when there's not any good, no matter how hard and dark and painful it is. And I'm reminded of what God taught us at Easter this year. We were in Romans, where it says, He makes all things good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. And in that season, God taught us that He's promised to make all things good eventually and not immediately. And you're the eventually. That there was a good portion of your life that was hard and that wasn't good. And maybe there'll be portions of it, like all of us, that aren't good again. But there is good, and God is still good, even when life isn't. And I'm grateful that you made it through all of that because you've become a friend that I need. And if that had broken you, I don't know where I would be, because when you encourage me, it hits different. I'm grateful for anybody's encouragement, but when you encourage me, it hits different, because sometimes I will text or call you with these stupid little problems of mine. And, but I know what you say in the form of encouragement, what you speak into my life in form of hope, is tested. Your faith has been tested. Your commitment to Christ has been tested. And you've come through the other side. And so it's a reminder to me, and I hope a reminder to everybody that's listened to this story, that God is still good.
He is. And one other moment that really sticks out in my life is back when I was a police officer. And I was battling all those demons, and I was working off duty one night, and there was a homeless guy that was on drugs that was sitting on a bench. And I went up and just struck a conversation with him. Just, hey, what are you doing? And that was probably someone that I would never have paid a lot of attention to, right? If I'm being honest, I was probably just trying to make sure he wasn't trying to break into something. But we sat there and we had a 3-hour conversation about life. And he was laughing about running from the cops and how he used to do this. And then we started diving into life. And we could have been on polar opposite spectrum of life, right? And we just started opening up to each other. And God used that moment, because I would never tell anyone, especially as a police officer, you're just always weird about talking about your family and guarded about that because it's a dangerous job and you don't ever know motives of individuals. But I told him that my wife was pregnant. And he was telling me about all the kids that he raised. And it morphed in this really deep conversation. And when I was leaving there, he said, you're going to have a little girl. And this is before we knew the gender. And he said, just keep in mind that God always replaces what He takes. And the day that I walked away from there, I didn't think much else about it. And then the day Mikey was born, my little girl, that was the first thing I thought of as she came out. I thought of that conversation of God always replaces what He takes. And I had a smile in that moment, right? Because as much as I missed Mom, like, here comes the next generation that I got to name after her.
Wow. It's good stuff, man. Thanks for sharing this with us.
You are good and all things perfect. Oh, I can trust your promise. I've never seen you turn away. You have loved me undeserving. Oh, I have seen your mercy follow me all my days. Oh, it doesn't make sense how your love is so good. You called me your friend and I thought I was too far gone. Now I know you're never gonna let me go. You are good, and you can only be good. You can't be anything else. You can't be anything Hindsight's always 20/20. Oh, I can look behind me and see just how far I've come. You saved me from the brink of falling, mercy shutting doors before me. Now I see all the good you've done. When it doesn't make sense and the future's unsure, I look at my past and I see you there all along. So I know you're never gonna let